Hello, welcome to Real Deal Fantasy HQ. I'm Cody Rear, and today we're going to be breaking down the Buffalo Bills fantasy outlook for 2020. Let's get to it. Hey guys, so today we're breaking down that Bills offense, but before we do, if you guys like this content or if you want more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. We're going to be breaking down every team in the NFL and how they're going to be looking for fantasy this summer before the league kicks off. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and let's get after it. All right, so obviously we're going to start with the most important position in football, and the Buffalo Bills have a great quarterback in Josh Allen. Last year, Josh Allen finished as quarterback 6, which is pretty good. This year, I have him ranked as my quarterback 4. I think Josh Allen is going to do great this year. He's played all 16 games. He's got another year in that offense. You add a weapon in Stefon Diggs, who I think is an elite wide receiver, and then rushing adds to his game. So something about Josh Allen that not a lot of people realize, big white guy quarterback. He's been an elite rushing fantasy quarterback, and I don't anticipate that to stop in 2020. He has 9 rushing touchdowns and 510 yards rushing in 2019. That is more than Lamar Jackson as far as touchdowns go. That's more rushing yards than Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson. So when you break down Josh Allen, you almost have to break him down into 2 different pieces. His rushing fantasy potential and then his passing fantasy potential. If his rushing stays the same in 2019, which I think he will. I think he will hit in 2020 what he hit in 2019, or at least get close to it, right? They're not always going to hit that exact value. But I think his passing is going to go up. You take that offense and you add a weapon like Stefon Diggs. You know they're going to get him some shots deep down the field. Josh Allen is an excellent deep ball thrower. Stefon Diggs had more catches over 20 yards last year than every receiver. I think Stefon Diggs is going to have a great year, and I think Josh Allen is going to be the beneficiary of that. I have him as my quarterback 4. He's currently being drafted at quarterback 9. So I think you can get some great value with Josh Allen this year. All right, so next up, we're going to take those running backs, right? Devin Singletary had a breakout year last year as a rookie, really excelled in that offense, but he was kind of hindered by that Frank Gore coming in, taking away some touches, taking away that goal line work. Bad news for Devin Singletary is they drafted Zach Moss, who was elite at Utah. Zach Moss was a great running back for the Utah Utes. Devin Singletary finished last year as running back 31. Now, he came on late at the end of the season, really was a valuable and usable fantasy starter. I think he is going to have a great year in 2020, but I think there are going to be some goal line touches and some of that first and second down work that's taken away by Zach Moss. I have him ranked as my RB26. His current ADP is RB24, so you're getting pretty decent value on him. I think he's going right where he should be. So that Bills offense should be better in 2020. Like I mentioned before, they added Stefon Diggs. Josh Allen's taken another year in that offense. I think that they're going to take a step forward, and I think the Bills' offense as a whole is going to be a beneficiary of that. It's also Devin Singletary's second year in the system, so I think that will really help him as a fantasy, help his fantasy efficiency, as well as help him perform. Now, we got to talk about the other side of the coin, right? We got to talk about Zach Moss. So Zach Moss is currently outside my top 40 at running back. However, I do think he is a valuable asset in drafts, especially if you draft Devin Singletary. So what I think of Zach Moss right now is I think that Devin is the guy, right? But Zach Moss takes over some of that Frank Gore role. And Zach Moss, everybody says, he's a one-cut running back, big physical bruiser. He's a bigger guy. But he's also a pretty proficient pass catcher. Last year at Utah, he had 28 catches for 388 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I don't think that he's going to step into the, receiving back role. I think Devin Singletary did a good job of that last year. But what that means for me is that if Devin Singletary were to miss time for any reason, if he were to go down with an injury, I think Zach Moss would be an elite handcuff. I think he would take over all 3 downs as far as, the running back snaps go. So he has some serious handcuff value. And what I like to equate him to is kind of that New Orleans running back system, right? So Alvin Kamara is the flash, and then you got Latavius Murray, who's the thumper in that offense, does some good goal line work, vultures away a couple touchdowns. I think Zach Moss can have that value where he, gets you, he's a touchdown dependent, gets you a couple yards. I could see him getting 10 to 12 carries every week. But as you saw last year when Alvin Kamara went down, Latavius Murray had some serious fantasy value. I think Zach Moss has some serious fantasy value this year. All right, so next, newest addition, right? You got to check out the new car in the garage. We're going to go Stefon Diggs, right? Last year finished as wide receiver 18 for the Minnesota Vikings. Came over as a trade this year. Buffalo traded away their first-round pick. Stefon Diggs had some troubles last year in Minnesota, right? There was that locker room issue in the beginning half of the year. Wide receivers were complaining about not getting enough touches, both him and Thielen. But he still finished as wide receiver 18. And I think Adam Thielen is an elite fantasy wide receiver aside from or next to Stefon Diggs. And I think Diggs is going to flourish as the true solo number one option in Buffalo. So Bills are 26th in passing. Vikings were 23rd in passing last year. So it's not like that Bills offense is a significant step back. I know a lot of people are worried, well, Buffalo runs the ball and Buffalo's offense isn't as efficient. Buffalo's offense didn't have a wide receiver like Stefon Diggs. I mean, plain and simple, John Brown, don't get me wrong, great talent, but he's not a true number one wide receiver. So I think that Stefon Diggs is going to do well. I think he's going to really outperform his ADP. His current ADP is wide receiver 23. I have him as my wide receiver 14. So I think you can get some serious value with Stefon Diggs. A lot of people get scared drafting a player who's moved to a new team because of the uncertainty around, you don't necessarily know what to expect. But I think Stefon Diggs is going to have some serious value. And while I can, Real Deal Fantasy HQ, there's an article up on there I wrote about how you can get some value on players who transition to new teams. I think Stefon Diggs is a player you can get some value on. Check that article out if you want to see more. All right, so John Brown, right, the other wide receiver. Great fantasy last year. Really outperformed his ADP. He was a top 20 wide receiver. He finished last year as wide receiver 19. A little streaky at times, but when you're a deep ball catcher in the NFL, you are going to be streaky if you just can't hit a couple games or can't hit it on a couple passes. You might have some down weeks. I have him ranked as wide receiver 38 this year. His current ADP is wide receiver 49, which is pretty low. I think he finishes inside that top 40. Obviously, taking a step back to that number 2 role is definitely going to hurt John Brown. But like I said, I think that Bills offense is really going to improve this year. So I think he does make a step up. I think he's a guy you can get some value on. I think this Bills offense is an offense that you can get a lot of value on in fantasy this year. And they're a team that I really like. I think they win that division. Who knows? We'll see. I think John Brown, what you get out of him this year, a lot of boom or bust potential. There are going to be some weeks where he goes 5 for 130 and a touchdown, and then there are going to be some weeks where he goes 3 for 37 and 0. So you're going to take with what you get, but I think John Brown has some value, and I think where he's going at his ADP, wide receiver 49, take a flyer on a guy like that. I mean, take a flyer. What's the worst thing that can happen? He's not going to burn you too bad. So the last wide receiver I'm going to talk about on this team, Cole Beasley, finished last year as wide receiver 35, which is, some decent fantasy value. I have him outside my top 40. His current ADP is wide receiver 68. I'm not drafting him. I don't think if either of these wide receivers go down, he really has a ton of upside. He's been a slot receiver his whole career. Kind of older now, so decent. But he finished as wide receiver 35 last year. If John Brown, who I think is a better talent than Cole Beasley, can finish as wide receiver 35 as the second wide receiver in this offense, which I think is going to be better than last year. Again, just hammering my point home on John Brown. Dude's a stud. All right, tight end. Look, Bills tight ends, they're not elite. Dawson Knox had a decent year last year. He finished as tight end 29. I have him ranked as my tight end 20. If you're running in a tight end premium league or 2 tight end league for some reason, I think he's a guy you could target. Bills targeted the tight end 16.9% of the time. It's 24th in the league. It's not great. Not a ton of upside. You're very touchdown dependent in an offense that now has some more weapons. They like to run the ball when they get into the red zone. Josh Allen will take it in himself. He's shown to do that. He did it 9 times last year. Look, if you want a flyer, great. I'm not drafting him, so you can stay away there. And last but not least, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the defense. Their defense last year, they finished 12th. They didn't add any major pieces. They drafted defensive end AJ Epinesa out of Iowa. I think he's a great talent, but I don't think it really brings that defense to the next level. You always love getting a pass rusher for fantasy defenses. If you like them, if you like their schedule, they don't have to play Tom Brady. They're playing a rookie quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa or Ryan Fitzpatrick, whoever gets start down there. They play Sam Darnold, who's, he sees ghost. Play him twice a year. Bills D, they're draftable. I don't think they're one of the elite fantasy defenses this year, but we'll see. We'll see. A lot can change. Tre'Davious White, cornerback on that team, absolute stud. So that's all I've got. That's all I've got for the Bills fantasy outlook in 2020. Again, if you guys like this content, if you guys like videos like this, subscribe. There's going to be more coming. We're going to do the rest of the NFL. We're going to do all 32 teams. We're going to break them down for you for the fantasy purpose and so that you know where to draft, get ahead of your buddies, all right, and crush fantasy in 2020. Bring home the gold. Real Deal Fantasy HQ. Peace.